Hey everyone, welcome back to my $1,500 Range Rover Sport rebuild. Last time we did a walk around of the truck and figured out that there may have been a little bit of insurance fraud in its past. So go check out that video if you missed it. Today we're going to start the engine and see what's going on. So let's get to it. So let's get this started. Just an airbag light to figure out. It does need fresh gas because that is varnish and it stinks. And the issue that I'm going to show you, which should happen any minute now, is potentially related to that, but also probably the MAF sensor and the throttle body. You may be able to hear a whine, and that is old, nasty power steering fluid that will also need to be done. Okay, here we go. So you can really see this, and that's possibly the throttle body and mass airflow sensor, or a combination of that and bad gas, but it is something that needs to be fixed. To address that fluctuation, the first thing we're going to do is clean the mass airflow sensor, which is right here, and the throttle body, which is in here. So it's common on the Range Rover Sports and the LR3, which this is based on.
Smelling coolant.
This from this again.
Is it wet around there?
No.
Oh.
Well, did you see it in coolant? Oh, it was wet there. Oh, look at that. I just found a coolant leak.
Oh.
So it did have low coolant when we picked it up, and we thought maybe it's this seal here that was weeping, but it looks like it's not just that.
It's the plastic end tank. It's not from the hose. It's the coolant end tank.
Oh, okay.
That's cracked. It is time for a new radiator.
Okay, well. With a new radiator on order, we can still work on fixing our idle issue. Now, if you want to clean your mass airflow sensor, you can probably just unscrew these two Torx screws, unplug this, and then pop it out and clean it up. But since we're also going to work on the throttle body, we have to take the airbox cover off and this off, so we're going to do that as well and check on the filter, because it could be, I don't know, maybe mice lived in it or something. Now for this, you're probably going to want a flathead. You need a Phillips for the air filter housing, and then on this car for the cover later, when we get to the throttle body, you'll need a 6mm socket. There we go. Yeah, as it gets gummed up with dirt, so if you hold the tab and pry gently with a screwdriver, just pop the connector off. Let's see.
Ooh, okay, that is dirty.
So is this piece here?
Yep. Take mass airflow sensor cleaner. Not anything else, because MAFs are generally pretty fragile. And you give it a couple of shots. They're supposed to be red.
What? The sensor?
It's actually red, as you can see. But you can sort of see it's getting a little cleaner, because you can see the wire inside.
Yeah.
So
when the mass sensor is clean, you should be able to see the wire inside its transparent dark red material. Make sure you don't touch this. Now we can take the airbox cover off. Take that off.
just make it a little easier to.
Yeah. You can also use a socket on there. It's really easily accessible for people.
One thing to note is when you're putting this back together, some people will use an impact. I wouldn't. These are pretty aggressive screws, and this is just really.
I mean, even this, you can see it pulled plastic out when we unscrewed them.
Yeah, it's just plastic. I'd be really careful. It'll be worth your time not to replace this part because going to the junkyard or
buying on eBay is going to be costly. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws. Now if you have the cover here, if it's in the way, just remove it so you can access these 3 screws more easily. And believe it or not, the battery is a Land Rover, a Jaguar Land Rover battery. It's a little tired, so it's going to get replaced, but it did work.
Now, one other thing. The cable for the mass airflow sensor is actually clipped to the edge of this, so you need to pull it out. And then like that.
And wiggle it out.
And, yep.
Okay, let's see. Okay, it's dirty. Yeah.
It needs a replacement. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
but it is a man filter, so
that's good. Since we're done with the MAF sensor, we'll screw it back into the airbox lid to keep it safe until we put it back in place. This is 6mm. Take the oil cap off. It goes through the cover. This is the 4 bolts and the oil cap.
yep.
And here you can see for the airbox 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So next,
So the throttle body is right here. And you gotta remove this hose.
completely. But you may remember our friend over here, the PCV hose. Just
Wiggle it.
wiggle it. Yep. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm gonna leave that there. And the throttle body.
Looks okay.
No, it is not closed.
Oh.
It should close completely. So what we're gonna do is remove that connector.
The throttle body is held on with 4 bolts, and there's a gasket between it and the rest of the intake. There are also a couple of hoses at the bottom that connect to the throttle body that you'll want to leave connected because they're coolant hoses. You can see that crescent, just dark stuff. It's probably accumulation that prevents this from closing completely. These 4 bolts, one here, one here, one here, and one here, are 8mm. Now when you do this, you're going to want to have a spare gasket because you don't want any air leaks around there. So you want to do this work with it just connected, but so you can access the back. So you can get throttle body and air intake cleaner, and probably you're going to want to spray that, I guess, on both sides.
You can see that it's not actually closing the way it should be.
It should actually come closer to that clear lip, that like clean lip. And so,
And you can see on this side why it's not. If you feel along the edge, there's actually a ridge of gunk. So also spray it in a well-ventilated area and not just straight over everything else.
when you're cleaning the throttle body, don't use anything abrasive. A microfiber cloth and throttle body cleaner will get you there with patience. Right here, you can see this ring. It's like black ring there. And that is the ridge you want to clean. So you will have to hold this open
Because it goes back on.
because it auto closes. Yeah, so make sure that's cleaned off before you reassemble everything. So once you're done cleaning the throttle body, and you can see that ring is gone, nice and clean. You want to wipe down a little bit in the intake and you can reassemble it. When installing the gasket, the orientation shouldn't matter, but we put the raised side towards the intake. Just get the thread started. You can hold the gasket in place so you don't have to worry about it sliding off. If this needs to be torqued to, it is only 7 pound-feet or 10 Newton meters. 10 Newton meters? With the electrical connector back in place, that's the throttle body cleaning done. Now this is also a good time to change your spark plugs since the air intake pipe is out of the way. To reach them, we have to pull the mass airflow sensor harness out of the way. This is the clip that goes into the airbox. It also clips to the PCV valve, which is mounted with 2 T25 screws. With that out of the way, we'll need to remove this panel that covers the coils to get to the spark plugs. This is clipped in. There's 2 clips in the middle. Just pops on.
Clip there and clip there.
And you can see the coils, and each one is held in by one 8mm bolt.
Bolt out.
So the coils are held in by 8mm bolt this length. Before removing the coils, it helps to unplug the connectors first because the harness is short. As we went to remove the furthest coil, it turned out the heater core hoses are in the way, so we'll have to unclip them to make more room.
Oh!
When you pull the clips apart, be careful. They can become brittle over time. We'll take care of this when we put it all back together. As you can see, we can easily remove the coil reaching behind the hoses now. To remove the spark plugs, we're using a magnetic spark plug socket. This one isn't as flexible as some other types, but it holds the spark plug really well and we have enough space for our ratchet. If your car sits a long time, the threads get all gunky. They're not. The spark plug's not terrible. It's
not great.
Not perfect, but not bad.
Doesn't say that there's anything wrong with the engine.
Right.
What you want on these are, and the Land Rover calls for NGK iridiums. We actually went and got NGK iridiums. These are also NGK iridiums, and they may even be the original ones.
That is what.
But you can see the difference there.
Yeah.
And this thing was still performing, but
just old.
Just old.
Yeah. We'll start by screwing in the new spark plug by hand to avoid cross-threading. Then we'll get it snug with a ratchet before torquing it to spec.
Good.
This is a magnetic spark plug socket. It's got a little ball joint, and then to get a little extra wiggle room, it's an extension with a wobbly end. That'll give you a little more flexibility. The part number for the spark plugs is the PKR5EIX-11 or 5464. Not too bad. And as always, when you're installing your spark plugs, place it in, turn like you're loosening it, feel the thread seat, and then start. So you do not want to cross thread spark plugs. That will cause you no end of troubles. The other 2 spark plugs are in the same condition as the others, which is good. Okay, that's all the spark plugs. Now, as you can see, all the coils are there. You have to put those back in. And that is the bolt that holds those on is 6 Newton meters. So it's actually just hand tight, barely hand tight. So We like to try to put the coils back where they were, but it technically doesn't matter. But
matters if you're trying to chase down a misfire where your coils are, but otherwise, not a huge deal, but I like putting them back where they are.
you can click it in and push it down. And run your little bolt in. Get it started by hand.
There we go, 4.
Our torque wrench doesn't go low enough for the torque required on the coil bolts, but it does display the current applied torque when tightening, which does show the right torque, so that's what we used. Hand tight should be fine otherwise, but we like torque specs.
There we go.
And that's the passenger side done. We'll have to put the hoses back up.
In honor of the Great Roadkill, we will have a zip tie moment
A little later, yeah.
these to get them back in place until we can get some new ones from one of our parts places.
Snap the panel back in. You might want to push with your.
And it'll pop. You'll hear it snap in, and then
It'll just pop on.
Sure. Back on.
Thicker.
That goes back here, but you want to under here. Because then we can put this side back together and then go back on that side.
With the spark plug done on this side, we're going to put the air intake back on. Slide it in until it meets the little tab right here, this little metal tab. Rotate it a little bit so that port comes out the back. Snap that on. Now, we'll put our new air filter in. This is a Man Filter C31-196. Compare. This is used filter. Really tell it got gunked up. There's a fresh filter, nice and clean, ready to protect the engine for a while. And with that done, we get the gearbox cover. It'll drop on. Pop it onto the intake hose. And once that's done, line it up on the top of the box. That's it. Now the last thing is to reconnect the mass airflow sensor. And then you want to pop the little tab back in. It goes into this little hole. Snap that on and it won't move around. And just have to tighten the last clamp. And that's everything on the passenger side. Well, besides those heater hoses that are loose because the thing broke.
We'll fix that with some.
One of them is on the floor under the car.
Yeah, like a zip tie.
Okay. Those clips broke off, so we're gonna try to. One of them fell through, so we're reattaching it. Right here, there's a zip tie going around the one original clip, and then over here, one going where the clip went. You don't want it to be too tight, but that will keep it out of the way and protect it from, you know, rubbing into things. Because if these lines go bad, that's your coolant draining out. And on the other side, space is a little tighter. It's the same thing. You can pop the panel off. Remove the bolts to hold the coils in. When When we tried to remove the furthest coil, we realized that the heat shield was in the way. It's held in with a screw at the top.
Just pulls out.
On the heat shield, there's the screw that goes into the top, and 2 clips here that will pop in so you can lift it out. Last one on the back. A little tight in there, but
Yeah, it's just really tight.
yeah. Just have to pull it past the hose of the pipes. To give ourselves better access to the spark plugs on this side, we can remove the oil filler neck.
You lift up. Let's turn.
You lift up on the hook. So this hook here locks it in.
Yep.
And then you can unscrew it. And we'll replace the spark plugs on this side too. Now you may have seen that the coil was hard to remove here because of the AC lines, and we can't really get it back in now, so we need to do something about that. The AC lines are held in place back here by an 8mm bolt. Unscrewing that bolt may allow us to move the AC lines out of the way enough to put the furthest coil back in. It turned out that the front bolt wasn't quite enough, but we found that the lines are also held in place near the coil we're having trouble with. If you know a trick to get to this coil, let me know in the comments.
Got it.
Nice. Removing these 2 bolts that hold the AC lines in gives us just enough wiggle room to put the coil back in. Be careful not to damage the AC lines when you do this. So before reinstalling the oil fill neck, this is where the little tab clicks into. So you're gonna pry up on it so you can turn it out and remove it. And just wanna make sure this area is clean before you put it back in, and that the fill neck itself is clean so you don't get dirt going into the camshaft area. And that will go in when the coils are torqued down.
There you go.
With all the spark plugs replaced on this side, we can reattach the AC lines, put the cover over the coils, and reinstall the heat shield. Now, since we know this has extremely old gas, at least 2 years old, and it smells like varnish when you run it, it smells like varnish when you open the cap, we're going to put in a little bit of octane booster and about 5 gallons of fresh premium or super gas. So you want high octane at the pump. It's better for these engines, even though they're not turbocharged or supercharged. You will benefit in the long run. Putting in the octane booster, we tried to estimate the amount we needed based on the 5 gallons of fuel we added and what was indicated on the fuel gauge. This is only to compensate for the old fuel, and we won't be needing it in the future when the truck is back on the road. We're back, and I'm going to turn this back on. We're going to start it and see how it does. Yeah, look at that. The 600 or 700 RPM. Well, that is rock solid. It sounds good. Check it out. Just discovered, by the way, this is damaged. I don't know if you can see it. It sounds really good. Cool. Now there's one evening of wrenching and we'll fix the idle. That's really good. I gotta say, it's nice having the engine running this well already. There's still a little bit of work to do in the engine bay with the crusty belts and the leaky radiator, but we'll get to those soon. Next time, we'll take a look under the truck and see how that is.
Uh-oh!
But anyway, we'll be making more progress next week, so subscribe so you don't miss out. If you're enjoying this rebuild, be sure to leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.